week, everybody. That's right. Halloween is this week already. Where the fuck has October gone? I don't know. I turn around and it's spooky season. I turn around again and it's over. But we're going out with a bang this week, ladies and gentlemen. We have our wonderful guests, Matt and Erin, joining us this evening with my usual partner in crime, Mr. Rainwater. And
howdy.
We are going old school. Old school, like beginning school, like where it fucking started. Horror movies seems to have been the hot topic of this month, and I promise next Halloween, October, we will not be so movie-centric with our horror Halloween obsession. But we might as well tie it all together this month. We're going back to the Universal Monsters. It's a Monster Mash evening, boys and girls. And we're going to be talking about everything that started. Mr. Rainwater watched all but one of the Universal Monster, the key Universal Monster movies this past week, correct?
I would call them the key ones, yes, including Bride of Frankenstein, for sure.
We're going to get to that. I do want to add that I love that you were live tweeting your watches. That was quite enjoyable.
That was fun.
Now you know why I do it.
That.
Now you get why I blow up your fucking Twitter feed on Friday nights with The Last Drive-In, where I'm just constantly running my smart-ass mouth. But right off the bat, I just want to know what everybody's number one, and there can't be any ties or any of this other nonsense. You got to pick one. What is your absolute number one Universal Monsters movie? I'm not going to make you pick the monster. I'm going to let you pick the movie. And we'll go with ladies first. So, Erin, right off the bat, start us off.
Invisible Man. Hands down.
Mr. Joker.
No ties, huh?
No ties. None of that. You're not copping out. You got to give me the truth. You got to pick one. Right. It's Sophie's choice.
So, I'll go Wolfman.
All right. The newbie in the group, Mr. Rainwater, who's just watched them all this week. I want to know.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I liked a lot of them, but I have to say the one that is still sticking with me is Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, I hate you so much. I hate you so much.
I'm not even doing this to troll you. It's seriously like the movie that I watched and I was just like, holy shit. Like
okay.
It stays with me.
I'm gonna be an odd man out, and I'm gonna go right off with the first and foremost Dracula. That's my boy. Which is accidentally how we're gonna start off. So we're gonna go through them in order of release. Just talking about the classic Universal Monster movies, what we think that they added, or not even added. Added's not really a fair word. I think the word they use is created, or set up, or they built the foundation for a lot of horror that comes today. Dracula's my favorite, bar none, because of, and I use this word a lot the last couple months, but the atmosphere in that movie is fucking on point. I don't care how much it falls apart by the end. That's my biggest critique, and it's before the Hays Code, so it's not really. You can't really blame the code for all that kind of stuff, right, where they just kind of, half-ass the ending. But it does fall apart by the end. But, man, the first, two acts are on point for me. Everything about that movie lands. The atmosphere, the performances, the comedy, which is sparse, but there. Right. Even the writing and the editing to some point, and much to a lot of fake film buffs' chagrin, the camera work I also think is pretty fucking stellar. I'm curious to know everybody else's thoughts on Dracula 1931 Bela Lugosi. Go, anybody.
Matt, Erin, y'all go first.
All right, so I'm gonna weigh in. Have you guys watched the Spanish Dracula? Gosh. That was made concurrently with that movie?
No, I didn't hear about this.
Okay.
Nobody here watched Haunted Home Theater, did they?
No. Haunted Home Theater.
I didn't get to catch
assume, Jow, that you have.
Yes.
I assume that you have.
I have.
I think they did some almost, and this is going to be blasphemy to you, Jow. I think they did some cooler stuff with that Spanish one in terms of camera moves and making full use of their sets. I think the shots were too tight in the Bella one, and I love Bella, but I love Bella because of my love for Edward D. Wood Jr. That's why I love Bella.
That's a big reason.
I will concede to your point because I know you are not a fraud. I know you are an authentic person who has watched the thing and you don't give a fuck if your opinion differs from everybody else's. That's how much I respect you. Anyone else who weighs in with that opinion, I would shit all over.
Here's the thing.
But before I forget, I just want to say you made a point when you just did that critique to make an alternate reason as to why the Spanish language is better than everyone else does. Because everyone else says that the Spanish language one, the camera moves more, and you were talking about the framing and how close it was in Lugosi's and stuff, and that's valid. I will absolutely give you that.
Because those sets are towering. They're huge. And like the Lugosi one cuts them off.
True.
Like there's rarely any long shots. And if there are, they're matte painted.
That's fine. What do you expect them to do?
Hey, no. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you have a big interior set that you built, do a long shot of that.
Well, especially I can point out a specific scene. You can actually go back and reference. It's once Renfield is in the castle and he's in the room and you're like, oh, you're in a 3-wall set like sitcom style and the sound stage is behind him. Nope, they're pulling out and now they're in another room. That means that set builder built a whole room, a doorway, like a walkway that had supporting structure in it, and another room.
Yeah, and the Lugosi one does not take advantage of that as much as they could.
Now, having not seen the Spanish one, I will say that something that I was really impressed by, even in the Lugosi version, is that I still found a lot of the sets, like especially when Renfield comes into Dracula's castle. Like, there's that initial moment when he steps into his inner chamber, right? Mm-hmm. There's a fireplace. And it's this huge room. I was really surprised by it because, this is an old ass movie. This is 1931.
31. Yep.
Yeah, they were breaking some ground. Carl Lammel knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I was. Oh, go ahead, John.
I just wanted to counter the point that Matt and Erin brought up because I brought this up during Haunted Home Theater. In the first scene, when Renfield walks into Dracula's castle,
I would be the one to become an apprentice for Dracula. Yeah.
When Renfield walks into Dracula's castle, there is the infamous scene where Dracula is waiting on the stairs, and Renfield is waiting until he says those infamous words, "I am Dracula." In the Bela Lugosi version, Renfield keeps his distance. He stays near the door. Lugosi's on the steps. Lugosi introduces himself, and then Renfield approaches. In the Spanish language version, Renfield walks in. Carlos something or other is on the stairs. Right. And despite being uncomfortable and unsure of who this guy is, Renfield approaches, and they cover it in a 2-shot where they're close. Yeah. And then Dracula introduces himself. So there's instances where they don't take advantage. So I feel like it's a trade-off. So
but
I don't know.
You know why they do that? Is so they can do that cool camera trick with the spider web. So that it looks like Dracula passes through it without disturbing it. And Renfield has to take his umbrella or cane or whatever and wrap it around so he can actually walk through it.
I give it that for the special effects point. But from a directing standpoint, it's unmotivated blocking for Renfield to approach when he doesn't know who this guy is. Whereas in the Lugosi version, for him to keep his distance until he's introduced and walks in, it feels more grounded and it feels more motivated to me. So that's the way I gather. So if you're going at it from a special effects point, I absolutely am right there with you. If you're going at it from a story, relatable, understandable point, I'm more Lugosi.
You're not wrong, but now we're getting into another part of a movie is an organism, right? Just like a stage play is an organism. Everything has its own thing. So now you're talking about it. Renfield basically has the same lines, whether you're talking about the English version versus the Spanish version. Yep. It's basically the same dialogue.
Correct.
Renfield in Bela Lugosi is a lot smarter. He's a lot more Western.
Yeah.
Like he's a lot more English. Like, oh, this is not right. Like he's very
proper.
that.
Yeah.
The Spanish one, he's an idiot. Like I loved watching him. He was delightful, but he was an idiot.
That's
like
fair.
So it's like he has no sense of like self-preservation. He's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, the man's like, your house is a little weird, but you know.
I hate the spiders. It's like, okay.
That's my other complaint about the Spanish version is it's very Telemundo. It's very like I know that the Lugosi version goes to 11, but the Spanish version goes to 26. Like it's that and that's why I don't like that Dracula more than Lugosi. I think Lugosi beats Carlos any day of the week.
Well, their Dracula was more like Man Who Laughs, like levels of facial expression.
Yeah.
I mean, not quite as extreme, but it was definitely, there was some like Chico and Chavo to it.
His eyebrows are raised more often than not. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, ooh,
yes.
Oh.
Yeah, like Bella had like the stare and like the look, and that was great. And
Bella's a fucking legend.
He is, so no hate. But like then Carlos the whole time is like,
yeah.
Like he smelled an aggressive fart for like 90% of that movie, and I'm for it.
We like weird shit, so we're like, yeah, that's awesome.
I'm gonna have to see this one then. I will say, having watched the not the Spanish version, something I don't really hear people talk about that often is like the dude who plays Renfield does a really great job in the transformation to Ren, like when he's like full Renfield.
That guy's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible in the Bella.
Like there's him and Bella like fucking sell that movie. Like it is so good. I mean,
when they find him in the ship hold and he's just cackling in the darkness and he appears.
Yeah.
You don't get better than that.
He's absolutely the performer that goes the most range in that movie because like, and I point not to be constantly shunning my shit, but in Haunted Home Theater, I made a point to rant about this for 5 minutes, how the dude goes from proper Englishman to, I don't want to call it a sex slave, but like a mind slave to a vampire, and he's like obsessed with like craziness. But then also, he turns another dime where he's like, oh, I'm tormented, and, you know, let me out of this, save yourselves. Well, like, that it's fucking 1930, and this guy is giving a full-fledged performance. Like, it was something to be notable, but I think even... I don't want to say it's better than Lugosi, but in terms of just all out authenticity in a role, Edward Van Sloan fucking nails.
Hard agree with you on that.
Van Helsing, because the one scene I need to talk about with you guys, because I feel like we can geek out about this together. The mind control scene between Dracula and Van Helsing.
Fucking amazing.
Yeah, right?
I love that scene.
Van Helsing Van Sloan gives the most subtle fucking performance of a war going on in his head that I have ever seen on screen before or since. Because, and again, Haunted Home Theater, I said, if it were a modern day actor, there would be like over the top body mannerisms and like heavy breathing exercises and shit going on. Things that are not needed. If you watch that man's eyes, like just the way he's controlling how like wide the pupils are and everything in his eyes, just his fucking eyes, you're getting the story about what's going on. It's brilliant.
Well, and then, really sorry, this is Theater Kid coming at you again. So, like, also take in consideration, this is 1931. We've just gotten out of the age of silent films where everyone's like, because they're not, and everything is like you're acting to a house of 2,000 because you don't have words.
You're playing to the background.
Yeah, so like, and everybody's pretty big or very dramatic. Like the movements aren't necessarily big, but whatever character they found or whatever truth that they found as the actor, like, is big. That guy, like to your point, that guy is so subtle, and that was so against type and expectation for that time.
Sure.
Yep.
It was probably just an overlooked performance at the time, but now I will rant about that one particular scene till the end of my life. I think is one of the it's one of the top 5 performances I've ever seen in a scene. Period. It doesn't matter if it's horror or not.
For sure.
Yeah.
No argument.
I have one more question I'd want to fill towards y'all and see if y'all have any opinion on this. The pick for that particular actor for Van Helsing, do you think that was because he kind of looked like Carl Jung? because he kind of like without the mustache.
Yeah, that had kind of occurred to me too, and like the anima and the shadow persona like is so strong in the Dracula mythos. I had wondered that myself.
I don't know if it was originally the case, but Van Sloan was also the performer that played Van Helsing opposite of Lugosi on Broadway. So I think it was kind of a package deal where they were just like, oh, he already knows the fucking lines. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's why he got it. But it doesn't take anything away from the performance. Like, but I absolutely know what you're talking about. And I agree. I wonder if he was cast in the play for that very reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not, like, if you had asked me this years ago, whether or not I thought they put that much thought into a casting process in 1930, I would say, no, they probably just said whatever. But given all of the things that take place so masterfully in this movie, setups and payoffs and, you know, just the deep thought and commitment to the roles in the film that everyone gave, I wouldn't be surprised if it were. Like if that was
I would say, you know, just in general talking about all of these movies, with exception for Creature from the Black Lagoon, in my opinion, they're all masterfully made movies. Like, the storytelling is just so good. It's straightforward. Like, it's no bullshit. There's, like, zero bullshit.
Well,
it moves.
We'll get there. All right. Does anybody have anything else that they want to gush about for Dracula or nitpick? I
don't really have any nitpicks personally
no real
for Dracula.
Because, like, don't get me wrong, I referenced right out of the gate the Spanish version. The Bella version's great. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to say it's not great. I'm just trying to say there were things they did in the Spanish version that I liked personally better than some scenes in the Bella version.
And I would say, too, from a production standpoint, just the fact that the American cast was filming their thing in the morning, they all wrapped, and then the Spanish crew and cast overnight came in and did it until they went, and so they were just rotating. And like, to me, the fact that they were shooting a movie on top of another movie is so cool and so interesting. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd love to talk to like a Latin American individual or Latino individual that like studies film and be like, you know, what was the significance of that for that culture? Because like we're not taught that. We're white. Like, you're just supposed to know about white people. So
well, and to that point, not to diverge too greatly, I'm going to keep this brief, but Diego, who's been on your show before with me, he was my roommate in college, and he's from Costa Rica, and he and I would get in discussions about how important monsters and folklore are in his culture. And like, there is stuff in that culture told to children that would curdle my blood as an adult. Like I know the movie kind of sucked, but like the mythos of La Llorona, the you know, she steals children in the woods at night and everything. Like, he told me that shit before we went to bed one night. I'm still a little irritated.
Diego, shout out to Diego.
Yeah, we love Diego. I love you, buddy. You're my family forever. But like, oh my God, I was pissed terrified that night. And he's just like, he grew up with it. So he's like, all right, man, good night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was white and afraid. This is new to me.
It's, I mean, and to tack on to that, though, it is very interesting because it's not only, you know, a different ethnicity's perspective. It's just, in general, a different artist's perspective. Like, you don't see, like, a simultaneous two artists, not the exact, but a very similar script and set pieces and costume and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. However, if you do watch Rainwater, you'll notice that there are differences in the costume design. I know Erin probably noticed because that's what she does, but the women are definitely dressed a little more scantily clad in the Spanish one versus the more conservative U.S. one. And I know Rainwater hasn't had access to this, and I'm sure Erin and Matt have watched it at some point, probably not recently, but like something like Dracula's Daughter is shockingly sexual. Like, over the top. Like, you're watching this going, this is a fucking 1930s movie, and she's doing like lesbian moves on this? What the fuck? Like, it's really kind of shocking, the things that they were doing with these movies in the 30s. I mean, granted, that's probably what all built up to the Hays Code, but that's for another podcast. But yeah, no, it's just interesting to see what another filmmaker was doing at the exact same time. And for those of you who have not seen the Spanish version, to Matt's credit, I'm glad he brought that up, because it's definitely worth seeing for the just for the alternate perspective and see how they did things, because it wasn't like they went off of the same shot list, but you know what I mean? Like, shots are different, shots are the same. So it's kind of ironic when you see the same shot, you're like, oh, they must have all been on the same page about that. No, it was just like, that was in the aura. That was what was left in the air supply. And they were like, oh, that's the shot we need to get. Okay. But
it's streaming free on Tubi right now.
Is it really?
Oh, cool.
It is.
I did not know that. Usually it's only on the bonus version of the Blu-ray releases and everything, which I don't know about you guys, but I scored that 4K box set. I was very happy about that. It was the only way I could get Invisible Man on 4K, and I was very upset.
Which is worth it.
Right.
I mean, that's her favorite, but I'm gonna.
That's what we'll get to that. But spoiler alert, he's my second. He's my second in my list. But
well, because we are buds, I actually knew that because we had this conversation in college.
But let's go to the second film that rocked out, which I don't agree with it being like him being the head honcho of the monster illustrations and promotions and stuff. But Frankenstein, 1931. It came out the exact same year as Dracula. Dracula came out in February for all those Valentine's Day dates. Frankenstein came out later in the year. I want to say it was November, but it might have been September. It was in that weird thing where it was like, oh, it premieres in New York in October, and then it travels like over the course of several months and stuff like that back then. So
and to sell it roadshow style.
Yeah, pretty much. But to me, this is the movie. As much as I love the atmosphere of Dracula, and don't get me wrong, it's fucking crazy gothic. A lot of the Transylvania stuff in there. This movie is what nails the gothic aesthetic of classic horror, and I fucking love it. And
110% more Wiener Schnitzel too, and Lederhosen for sure.
Yeah, and they did that. They I mean, granted, it's all British people playing quote unquote Germans, but it's
Hello, old chap. Would you like a Wiener Schnitzel?
That's fucking James Whale, which I know we're gonna get into a discussion about him since he helms 3 of these fucking movies.
Right.
But it's actually one of my. I would say Frankenstein is in my top 4. I have a top 4, and it kind of cuts off there.
It's an iconic look.
Yeah, it's my Mount Rushmore. We'll call it that of monster heads.
And I mean, just like what before Frankenstein, name another special effects monster makeup before it.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, that was Caesar the Somnambulist from Caligari.
But that was really just a lot of black makeup.
Just grease paint, right? Nosferatu. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dracula, there wasn't a lot of special effects makeup on him. That was just Bella's Magnificent.
Yeah, I don't think he had anything. He doesn't even have teeth.
He was completely toothless.
Yeah, he's got no makeup on him, and I think the female vamps just have like crazy high eyeshadow and maybe like super glossy lips. Like that's the extent of it.
Super beautiful 1930s makeup that I can't for the love of me find a tutorial on, and I need to figure it out because there's nothing like makeup for both men and women from 30s movies.
True story.
But anyway.
But no, Frankenstein. The work on Frankenstein is absolutely. I mean, they literally. It could just be post movie hype, where they talk about people went running from the theater and all this kind of nuts when Karloff turned around for the first time. Oh, Joker's got a point. Go for it.
I do have a point. I raised my finger to not be as rude to you as I normally am. So, my point is, my beloved grandmother, rest her soul, my late grandmother. She said one of her first dates with my grandfather, he took her to see Frankenstein. And then they walked home together at night. And his house came up before hers. And he left her to walk home by herself.
That's so fucked up.
And she said she couldn't sleep for days. And she said she never watched another horror movie since then.
Wow.
Because Frankenstein fucked her up so bad.
Wow. That's awesome. And see, a lot of people take that for granted these days. It's kind of like when you talk to someone about The Exorcist and they laugh, and it's like, motherfucker, you're such a, like, go watch your Conjuring movies. Like, get out of me.
To diverge on The Exorcist for a brief moment, the theater cut of Exorcist when it debuted is a different story than any other version of Exorcist that any of us have watched. Because my mother went to Exorcist in the theater on its first run during the subliminal message days when it had the subliminal shit in it before it got outlawed and had to be reprint.
Oh, shit.
Oh, wow.
My mom never watched another horror movie after The Exorcist. So I am the least cowardly of my line because I kept fucking watching the horror movies after the first one.
So cool. But this movie is kind of the crown jewel, I guess we could call it, of the monster movies. Like, everybody defaults. Like, if you ask somebody who's never seen it, they'll lie and tell you Frankenstein's their favorite because there's really nothing to dispute about it. It's kind of a perfect movie. I don't know if I can find a flaw for
It's a
it.
short movie, I'll tell you that.
Well, they all are, but you know. I'm curious to know, Rainwater. I know it couldn't have been your first watch of it, but it probably the most recent time you've seen it, like spaced out. So I'm curious to know your impressions.
Yeah, I mean, with Frankenstein, it's an interesting movie because it feels a little more somber to me than the other, especially than the other Universal monster movies. And part of that is because, like, what I get from it too is, like, Frankenstein's monster isn't really the scariest part necessarily. Like, I felt bad for him most of the movie because he's tortured throughout a lot of it. Like, you know, his end comes from not really anything he ever did, even though he did things, but he's not aware. You know what I mean? It's like the tragedy. It's more like a tragic movie for me because it's like the tragedy for Frankenstein's monster is that he's basically a child in a giant man's body.
He's Gothic Lenny.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly. And so, like, he basically has to suffer at the hands of everybody else who doesn't understand his situation because his situation's it's brand new in reality, basically. Like, he's basically brought into this world by this asshole who's just like, well, I want to make life from death. Fuck what you feel, you know?
But to that point, though, I believe, and forgive me if I'm getting the actor's name wrong, Clive Cussler plays Dr. Frankenstein. Is that correct?
Clive. You got the Clive part right.
Okay.
Hold on. Colin Clive.
Colin Clive. There we go. He's masterful to me because he's that old school silent film stage actor where it's like, Mary, blah, blah, blah. Like, the pronunciations are so cool, and he fucking goes for it when he's like super excited. He's like, it's alive!
I will say that both of the Frankenstein movies, that's something that I appreciate about both of them, and they both go ham in different ways, and I appreciate it. Like, and I think it's a different sort of. Both of those movies are going for something very different, and we'll get to Bride later. But like with Frankenstein, I think it is trying to go for like big emotion. Whereas something like Dracula is trying to go more for like seep in, creepy, like, you know, and I think that is the thing that I kind of took away from Frankenstein was just this feeling. It was more like it's a more ponderous movie, really.
It's more tragic too. To everything that you're saying, it's so sad because like the monster didn't ask to be what he is, but he has to deal with it because of other people's choices. Yeah. And I mean, really, like they don't get into this as much as I feel like they should have, but like the whole driving reason for Frederick to want to create life is because his whole family died from like plague or like diphtheria or, you know, any one of those Victorian illnesses that happen. But like they all died. And so, like, it's just trying to be able to control your circumstances. So, like, that's I wonder if that is why Frankenstein has such an impact, because everyone knows what those feelings are for both Frederick and the monster.
I wouldn't dispute that. I would say it was kind of more to what Joker was talking about before about, or I don't know if it was Joker or Rainwater, but one of you guys was mentioning that that feeling of ostracization, not relating to the surroundings and not having much control over, who you are and how people react to you, and you just kind of have to make do with it. And I think everybody kind of feels that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I'm not a monster, and we're all going to be on the same fucking point here. If you're listening to this podcast and you call Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein, you're fucking wrong. It's the monster. Wrong. I mean, you can debate the idea that Dr. Frankenstein is the monster because he's the monster. He's the mad scientist. If you want to call a mad scientist a monster, there you go. But
he's the one who makes the moral choice that actually impacts everybody's life.
Right.
Basically.
Yes. It's very Greek tragedy when you examine it, because it's the hubris that gets him.
It's the hubris that kills him.
This was another movie too where like the sets really like got my attention. There's that particular scene that I can think of where it's like the stairwell leading up to the chambers where like he reanimates the corpse and stuff. The way it's shaped, it's so like, I don't know how to put it other than like expressionistic, because it doesn't really structurally make sense. Yeah. It's like diagonal and it's kind of like it's warped, and I love the way that they do that, because I think it adds to sort of the warped sensibilities, like in Frankenstein's lab. Like everything's kind of like life itself is kind of being warped by his mania, basically.
Well, and that goes back to like something I mentioned earlier, which is like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Like that's kind of like a parallel to Frankenstein's monster with Caesar and Dr. Caligari, because it's a creation of a different type. And then when you get to the end, spoiler alert for a movie that came out in the early 20th century, it could just all be something that was made up by someone else. But that movie is always heralded as the expressionist icon of horror films.
Sure.
And I feel like Frankenstein borrowed something from that.
Oh yeah, and that was the next question I was going to ask, if y'all had any idea if like either there was some attempt at homaging or pointing to like German filmmaking through that. But would y'all have any idea about that?
Not in an academic sense.
Okay.
They say it's there.
Probable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that as much as the film industry at that point was really starting to boom and they wanted to crank out as much as they could because they realized, like, man, this is the new cash cow, they were still pulling from professionals that worked in theater forever. And, like, production designers are still thoughtful about what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't... I think it would be silly to think that they just were like, we'll just do this. Somebody put in the angle wrong. Yeah, fuck it. It's fine. Use it. It's fine.
Well, I mean, you also have things like we were just talking about Nosferatu, which is a German film of Dracula. And when they made Lugosi's Dracula, there is shit that they stole from Nosferatu that's not in the original book. They literally, you know what I mean? Like they were aware of German filmmaking, and they were definitely biting it as much as they could. So I'm not referenced enough in terms of like watching all the old German films and stuff. I'm sure I will be one day, but right now I can't attest to it. But I'm not putting it past them to either be ripping off or homaging or being inspired by those works of art, because it's very clear that they were aware of what was going on overseas and so on and so forth.
And I mean, the economical structure of early Hollywood, I mean, it started out with, the sneeze, right? And then the racehorse, like Persistence of Motion, all of this like early film, The Train,
the moon thing.
Everything. Man
in the Moon.
Journey to the Moon. Yeah. It's all of that stuff. But then Europe started being like, hey, yeah, you're right. We should start doing this shit. And they start trying to like crank out stuff. And then a lot of them emigrated to early Hollywood to kind of join the whole festivities. And I mean, of course, you get a lot of that influence in that way.
Edward Van Sloan. I do believe he was German, correct? Or of
Correct.
German descent.
So. Yeah.
Fun fact, and this has nothing to do with really anything that we were talking about, but kind of a little. In the process of researching for Haunted Home Theater, that's right, I'm going to keep plugging it.
Please do.
Just so you know, I don't have time to listen to podcasts I'm not on.
It's not a podcast. It's not a podcast. It's a second screen show. Thank you very much.
I only have one screen and you're on it.
I did Sleepy Hollow, the Johnny Depp Tim Burton movie. And at the end of that, they have a very blatant homage to Frankenstein with the burning windmill and so on and so forth. So I recently went to Sleepy Hollow because I love going there every Halloween. And I took a tour of Washington Irving's house. And there were a couple of very educated speakers talking about stuff. One of them informed me of something I did not know, which was that Washington Irving spent time in Europe, and you will never guess who had the hots for him, and he just wasn't having it. Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
And
she kind of had the hots for everybody, including Lord Byron. So
I'm just saying, we could have had a OG horror couple like back in the 1800s.
Well, when you're hanging out with Lord Byron, the original fuck boy, it's kind of hard to. I don't know.
Oh my God, make t-shirts.
Yeah, pretty inspired description there, Rainwater.
Okay. If anybody has anything they want to throw out there more about Frankenstein before we move on, feel free to take the floor right now.
Dude, let's end it on Lord Byron, the original fuckboy.
I don't think we can top that. No pun intended.
I mean, good night, everybody. Like, I don't think we're gonna get better than that.
I think Rainwater's gonna be left out for a couple of minutes here because we're gonna talk about The Mummy, 1932. We've moved on to the next year. They were banging this shit out like Marvel movies, people. And it was. What
was the date for The Mummy?
The Mummy was 1932, and Dracula and Frankenstein were both 1931.
Hot tip. I know you just kind of ended Frankenstein, but I'm a rebel.
Yeah.
They offered Frankenstein to Lugosi after he was great as Dracula.
Did they?
And he turned it down.
That's interesting.
And then he had a lifelong grudge against Boris Karloff because he thought Frankenstein took zero acting skill to portray, or Frankenstein's monster. And I love that about him. I would love to go back in time and talk to Lugosi if he would let me, because he seemed like the right kind of cantankerous.
So if Lord Byron is the original fuckboy, Bela Lugosi is the original ice bitch,
Shade Queen.
Yeah.
Shade Queen. Dracula, the original Shade Queen.
I'm gonna go right off and say it. I don't care for The Mummy. It bored me. It was one of two Universal monster movies that bored me. This is definitely a very basic bro take on it, but there's not actually enough mummy in it for me to be happy. By the time we got
mummy.
Yeah, like I need the dude wrapped in gauze, slowly, jumping around and doing stuff like that. Like how it's closer to my expectations were better filled with, I believe it was The Mummy's Hand. It was a follow-up where like it's legitimately just a guy wrapped in stuff and wandering around a neighborhood and shit like that. And like strangling people and stuff like that. Like that was much more what I was after, as opposed to Karloff mentally hypnotizing some woman to thinking she was his long lost bride as he's regenerated to, not being in Karloff makeup. You know what I mean? Like it feels like we were gypped of Karloff's, makeup and acting and stuff like that as Imhotep. It didn't work for me.
Here's the thing about The Mummy for me. And she knows this because I've shown her this recently. I prefer the Hammer horror Mummy with Christopher Lee as a mummy movie.
And Peter Cushing.
And Peter Cushing, of course. Let's not forget the master of all masters, Peter Cushing. Love you, Peter. Like, love the Hammer Mummy. So good. And like, The Karloff one has its merits, but the biggest merit about the Karloff one for Universal was the Sassy Gal Friday in it, and all of her dialogue. She is a sassy bitch, and I loved every second of it.
That's fair. I'm not gonna go
And
against that.
eyebrows are on point.
Her eyebrows
also.
are on point. True.
They are on point.
Another one.
Rainwater, I do hope you check it out though in the coming weeks if you can find a way to do it. It's obviously it's worth a watch, but if I had to pick one, I would say that the Brendan Fraser one is much more my alley. It's not a horror movie, obviously, but I feel like that's a better management of that story. I love
any movie with Brendan Fraser in it. So
he's an angel fart.
Gotta love Brendan Fraser. Love you, Brendan.
Unless anybody has anything to throw out about the Mummy that I'm overlooking other than eyebrows, we can move on.
Hey, let's not discount the eyebrows, though. Bleep the fuck.
Listen, I'm not gonna. That's another point in Dracula's Daughter that had me going, that's wow, prominent.
Yeah, Italian eyebrows, man.
But I think maybe I'm just so gung-ho that I just want to move so fast because next up is The Invisible Man. Which,
oh my God.
Okay, this is my number 2, and it's really hard for me sometimes to admit that he's 2 to Dracula. But Dracula was my first love of all of them. It was like the first movie I saw when I was a little kid, so he's got that place. But,
nice.
You know, I watched The Invisible Man more recently, probably within the last couple of years, and that's when I really fell in love with what it is, because to me, and we're going to get into it, the next film in the thing, Bride of Frankenstein, they are 2 films in a very similar vein by the same director, and I absolutely hate Bride of Frankenstein, and I fucking love The Invisible Man. And it's a very I want to call myself a hypocrite, but it's a very...
You're not a hypocrite.
It's kind of a hypocrite take because they're very zany and wacky and fantastical in the same vein, but one of them works as a horror movie to me. The Invisible Man creeps me the fuck out sometimes. Like the zany, over-the-top madness is what's scary about him. He's a madman, and he's just going nuts, gathering nuts in May. Like, fucking, like... That is what's crazy about him, is that over the top, he can do anything. And then when they cut to just, you know, a fucking door creaking open slowly, and you're like, oh shit, is that him or the wind? That rocking chair's moving a little bit. Is that him or the wind? Like, that stuff works. It works.
I want to say, so Erin, I want to hear what you had to say, because this was your favorite that you had said. And I will say that this was, after Bride of Frankenstein, this was my next favorite. And I want to say, like, the opening to this movie, my favorite opening of all of those movies.
Can you clarify what you mean by the opening? Like from what point?
Him arriving at the inn and getting set up in the inn, and then the innkeeper finding out, like, what the fuck is going on with this dude. Where you have the scene where, like, he's trying to eat dinner, and that scene freaked me out. Like, it's fucking creepy. It's a creepy fucking scene. And
they don't overdo the visual effects either. It's very subtle.
And when they do, holy crap.
For 1932? Oh, yeah. That's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
Super good.
Yeah.
But so, Erin, this is your number 1, so we're waiting for you to elaborate. Gush. Feel free to tell us what, like... Just go down the list.
So I'm like thinking about it, and I'm glad we actually didn't start with this, because now I've had like the other ones that we've talked about to like compare and contrast to. One, it's one of the closest to the original source material. Like there are beat for beat, line for line moments that are out of that book. So they were true to the source material, and what's cool about that is that they didn't get suffocated by the source material. They just used it as a thing. And like, so his mania is delightful, but like, and that whole thing as he gets more and more like ramped up is great. I think overlooked part of his performance that is amazing is he is an unrelentless dick. It's fucking hilarious. Like, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Like, and like you think about it, it's like nobody did that. Nobody did that. Like, I would love to know if they knew they were playing it for the humor, or if that's just my modern sensibility projecting on that. Because like, if you think about it, like, if there's a character in a movie who's a dick, they're the bad guy. They're always the bad guy. There's nothing, and I'm not saying he's, his moral compass is due north, but like, he's both the antagonist and the protagonist.
Yeah, for sure.
Both. Like, yeah, watch that again.
There's a very interesting thing that separates Dracula out of many of the other ones, is that most of the monsters are kind of that tortured monster. They're kind of, you know what I mean? Like, every single one of them has something redeemable about their motivation, and you get it. Like, Dracula's the standout, and if you look at like the Coppola version, obviously they rectified that with, they rewrote the storyline and everything. But outside of that, every single Universal monster that I can think of is some kind of lost soul. Like you know what I mean? Like they're a tortured being that didn't want to be put in a particular situation, and are trying to either make do with what they've got or get out of it. And Invisible Man is definitely on point with that, but they don't hang on it the whole movie though. That's the thing. It's not like,
I mean, I watched The Invisible Man and I'm like, yeah, dude's just trying to meet his deadline. I can relate to that. Like, leave me the fuck alone. Come on.
Well said, man.
And okay, so now I'm gonna bitch about the one thing that I hate about it, and the three of you are gonna disagree with me. I hate Una O'Connor. She annoys the living shit out of me. I know that's the point, but I don't care for it.
Here's what's funny about that. She works in The Invisible Man, and she annoys me in The Bride of Frankenstein.
She annoys me in both, but I can see that.
Yeah, like she works in The Invisible Man because I think in The Invisible Man, like there is a lot of attempts at humor in that movie that work generally, and when she's kind of, she hams it up, right?
Yeah.
Like she hams it up like to 11, and that works fine in that movie because she's like going toe to toe with Claude Rains, who's like hamming it up to like 12 or 15. Like
she's the second most zany in that movie.
Yeah.
I wonder too, like, because there are so, like, and this is another thing that sets this apart, going back to it, there's so many beats of humor, whether it's intentional or unintentional in that movie. There's a part of me that wonders, was that an actor's secret between her and Claude Rains, where it's like, he actually didn't give a shit about her. She just was really into him. And so, like, her whole, like, I have to, and he's like, get the fuck away from me. Like, just, I'm going to get visible now. Like, I'm not into you. Like,
he's just not that into you. He invented a serum to make himself invisible just because he's not that into you.
But no, this movie, I mean, this is the movie that I like to do when I'm not in the mood for moody, atmospheric horror. Like, this to me feels like the clash of comedy and horror that works, and that's very rare for me. Like, I don't vibe with that particular genre. I usually look at it as like, there's either comedy or horror, and there's no such thing as a horror comedy. I very rarely will acknowledge a movie to actually be a horror comedy, despite it being billed that.
I also want to point out that just the design, like the costume design for the Invisible Man himself, it's weird to me, but it's creepy as fuck. And I can't. Yeah. It's not like something that is really obviously creepy, but it sets in as you look at him. Like, why is his nose so fucking big? Like, what is, It's like the way his hair sticks out. Yeah.
And there's something about the desaturated film, the black and white film, that adds to that, because if you had that nose in color in modern day thing, it'd be goofy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it would be straight comedy. It would not be in that like off-putting unease of something's wrong here.
I think that's 100% a modern sensibility thing, and I'll tell you why.
Maybe
because the reason that whole, and to your point, Rainwater, the reason that costume, the bandages, the fake this, is creepy is it's the theater of the mind. Like back then, that was your option for a fake nose if your nose fell the fuck off because of syphilis.
Yeah.
Like that. So everyone has that, like.
You're right, because it really evokes that. It really evokes like a sickness kind of thing.
Yeah, so everyone's like, oh my God. Like, and that's like, it's that, like, that poor man, but oh my God, like, what does he have? Like, is he just a burn victim or is he, like, contagious? Like, and you don't know which one you want to go with.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and on a completely different level, costume-wise, since we're on that piece, it's a man in full bandage, right? But then he's in a smoking jacket. What that says to me is I'm horribly burned or have a fucking terminal malady, but like, let's party. And
that's true. That's a good point. To me, if we're going on about what works in that costume for each of us, I gotta say it's the glasses. Those because you know something. It's one thing that they're pure black, like you can't see through them to see his eyes, because we all know, you know, hiding someone's eyes is a great way to put people off, like, because you can't read them. But the side part of them, I don't know if that's like a 1930s thing or not, but the fact that they're obscuring the sides of his head a little bit too, with the same kind of design, that to me is also really fucking cool. And if I could get a pair of glasses like that, which I've tried to eBay and it's like either insanely expensive or just not available. But they're fucking cool, but they're also very creepy. Like every part of this guy, and you know, I joke, but when we started the pandemic, people were walking around like that. Like it was like legitimately people were wrapped up, and that to me was off-putting in a grocery store. Like I could not see a speck of skin on some people wrapped up in scarves with a hat on, sunglasses. Like it really is off-putting to see someone
looking like Marlon Brando and fucking Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it's literally someone is obscuring as much detail as they can about themselves as physically possible. And to me, that's very off-putting because it's obvious someone's got something to hide, and you don't know what it is. Like that whole H.P. Lovecraft, you know, like the unknown is the most terrifying thing. They embodied it completely in that costume design. And I mean, granted, you have to, given, you know, his particular, I don't want to call it, is it the deformity? His ailment, I guess?
I guess ailment. Yeah.
They have to.
Or addiction.
Sure. But like it works. Like the whole costume, head to toe, works. And I also love, I mean, it's 1930s and it's also, it still happens in modern day, but the love story takes a back seat to the whole, you know, he's kind of bossing around his best friend the whole time, and then he ends up murdering his best friend. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, here's our love story, blah, 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 but here's the really cool part. And they really kind of put that front and center, whereas a lot of the other monster movies put the romance front and center. And I think that's one of the things that really endears to me about the Invisible Man is that, yeah, it's there because I feel like it has to be there. It's like one of those like studio note type things, but the story really takes front and center the entire time, and that to me is refreshing. It's why probably I put it as my number 2.
Well, and it would kind of make me wonder now, in retrospect, like I want to talk to somebody who is about like old LGBTQ cinema, and is this considered an entry in that history? Because you're right. I never at any point got the feeling that he gave a shit about her.
Yeah.
He was her whole world, but he didn't give 2 shits about her. But, like, my God, was he knocking down his best friend's door.
Yeah.
All the time.
And
like,
that's a beautiful segue, because we were about to talk about Bride of Frankenstein. And
yeah, that is a theme that comes up in Bride of Frankenstein a lot.
Well, here's the thing. And I'm hawking this so hard this evening. In my prep for Haunted Home Theater Episode 2, which was planned to go this Friday, but it has now been rescheduled to April, I was planning on showing The Old Dark House, which is not included in the movies that Rainwater was able to watch, but I'm pretty sure you could find it anywhere. I think it's free of copyright now. I think they gave up the copyright, if my research is correct. However, directed by James Whale, also stars Boris Karloff as a lumbering oaf who's mute. James Whale was openly gay in the 1930s, which hats off to that dude, because that was a time and day where that shit didn't fly very easy. Boris Karloff was closeted gay. He had several marriages, which all ended because they eventually found out dude was gay. Colin Clive, the father of Frankenstein, also gay. Also cast in James Whale's movies. You're starting to see a running theme here.
Sure.
Ernest Thesinger? What's his name? The guy who plays Dr. something or other.
Pretorius?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Ernest.
He's full blast Queen. Like
Ernest
that's what I love.
Thesinger. Yeah, he was also he was also gay. The Old Dark House was the first time that Karloff and James Whale reteamed after Frankenstein, and that's when Pretorius Ernest Thesinger also joined that kind of collective. So now we get to Bride of Frankenstein, and Old Dark House was absolutely the segue for James Whale to just be like, fuck it, I'm gay. We're going full gay on everything from here on out. If you watch Old Dark House, like he's doing shit in that movie that's not as fantastic as Bride of Frankenstein, but he's definitely elevating LGBTQ stuff right in the forefront. He casts a woman as the dad. Like right there you have like a trans thing going. So by the time he gets to Bride of Frankenstein, the train's not stopping. He's going right through everything. It's even more interesting because him and Karloff had broken up at that point. So they're kind of stuck in this picture together. And from my research, I don't know if this was actually in Bride of Frankenstein or if it started in Old Dark House or what, but James Whale and Karloff were not on speaking terms at all. So much so that they had to give each other notes and direction and such through the other actors through written paper. They would not speak to each other. Like that's how bad the breakup was.
Wow.
Yeah. If you think Lugosi hated Karloff, meet James Whale. But this movie, Bride of Frankenstein, now I can appreciate it for that reason of James Whale coming into his own and being like, fuck it, this is me, this is the kind of movie I want to make, this is everything, like this is just my sensibility, this is my style, here it is. As a fan of the original Frankenstein, this is how I prepped Rainwater for it, and he told me it was spot on point. Bride of Frankenstein is the Batman and Robin to Frankenstein's 89. It's just...
I don't know about that.
It's such a hard left turn in terms of the gothic tone, the dark horror seriousness from, the Frankenstein that freaked out your grandmother that she couldn't sleep or see a horror movie again, to the Frankenstein smoking a cigar and drinking a scotch. Like you know what I mean? Like we're going a completely different direction.
The comparison to Batman Forever. That is the threshold.
I'm just saying, like in terms of my expectation.
We're going to Schumacher still, so know.
But in terms of my, it's just a matter of in terms of my expectation. I wanted more of the serious, grounded, horror, gothic, moody, atmospheric of the original Frankenstein, and what I got was not that at all. We went in a completely
other direction.
Elsa
Lanchester, who would then go on to feature in Mary Poppins as one of the maids.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Bride of Frankenstein is one of the maids in Mary Poppins.
But see, and this is my other gripe with that movie. Let's throw the tone thing out, right? In terms of my expectations. The bride gets showcased on all kinds of promotional stuff. She's in this movie for 30 fucking seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
She's not in it.
All of the fucking fan art and all the like people emulating the Bride of Frankenstein treat her like she legit loved the monster, like they're holding hands and stuff like this in art, and I'm like, no, she fucking rejected him. Like that's the fucking movie.
Watching this movie, at the end of it, I was like, the Bride of Frankenstein's actually Dr. Pretorius. And they never I never even knew about Dr. Pretorius until I watched this movie, and he. Like, I tweeted as soon as I watched him show up, I was like, oh, this is the life of the party. This is where it starts. Like, as soon as he shows up, the entire movie is about him being like, yo, Dr. Frankenstein, let's animate some corpses. Like, that's all he talks about. It's all about Dr. Frankenstein trying to, like, I don't know. And then Pretorius is like, come on, man, come on, you know. It's wonderful. It's wonderful because for me, the movie is, I feel like the movie's like two friends who find each other, but one friend is way more into the other friend than the other one is. And in that sense, it's really comedic. And it's also tragic. It's sort of, for me, Bride of Frankenstein's kind of a tragic comedy. And, you know, agreeing with Jow in that, you know, when you compare it to the original Frankenstein, it's the most inappropriate sequel ever. But on its own, I really enjoyed it. And it's also, that movie moves at like a lightning speed. Like, there's not a dull moment. There might have been like one kind of at the beginning, but it keeps going. And it keeps going into places where I'm not expecting it to go. Like, I know, like, this was something that bothered you, Jow, a little bit, which was like the people in the bottles, right? When Dr. Pretorius is like showing off like how he can create life and stuff. I remember watching that moment. It was more like, it was weird and surreal and creepy, like it, because it was like Pretorius is trying to show off to Dr. Frankenstein, like, yo, you think you've got it, but look what I can do, you know? And that turns into like, wait, what's that?
Tiny people. You never seen tiny people like this.
Exactly. I found that movie, it is kind of a B movie in the sense that some of the artistry is a little bit lacking. The first 5 minutes of the movie is an anime recap. You know, it's weird too. It's like, you know, Byron and Percy and Mary Shelley like hanging out, and they're just like, oh, by the way, you wrote this story, right? And then like, that was one of the weirdest openings to a movie that I've ever watched. But after that, like, the whole thing just takes off. I have a lot of complaints about Frankenstein's makeup in that movie, or Frankenstein's monster's makeup, I mean, in that it feels totally different from, you know, the original, right? And the makeup in the original is like really, like, it's iconic, like, the way that like his cheeks are so shallowed, like the flatness of his head. And I feel like in this one, it's just like you don't get the same impact of Frankenstein's monster. And then of course when he starts talking and drinking, smoking.
I always just think about the Mel Brooks, like with what's his face?
Peter Boyle.
No, well, yeah, that's the monster, but Lex Luthor, Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, Gene Hackman.
Oh,
yeah, that's what I always think of, because like that's a much better, more honest portrayal of what that is, because it's hilarious. Like,
yeah, it is.
I'm curious.
Is that also the one where there's the German townswoman who is just up in everybody's shit every 5 seconds, and like that movie should really just be like old German woman up in everybody's shit? Or is that the first one? I can't remember, but I was just like, oh my god, this woman is on. Like she's at a 15, and everybody is normal like 6 or 7.
I think. Are you talking about Una O'Connor's character?
No.
I
think you're thinking. I think you might be thinking it might be one of the later ones, like Son of Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
The one where Bella finally signed on to be part of that franchise as Igor.
And that's the only time, I believe Son of Frankenstein is when Bella and Karloff shared the screen, right? They did, because he played Igor, not Igor. Was it Igor?
Yeah, Karloff was Igor, because the first one was Fritz.
Right,
the first
that's right. You're right. But yeah, no, I'm curious to know, because Joker, you and Erin kind of know more about this than me and Rainwater in terms of like makeup design and all that kind of stuff. It is kind of I mean, you guys would know. I'm just saying more than me and Rainwater. I'm not saying you're experts, but like it is a running thing. If you pay attention to all of the Universal monster movies, when they start doing the sequels, the makeup seems to get worse as it goes on, and I'm trying to understand why that happened. Like, it's not difficult to just repeat the same shit you did. Like, I'm curious to know why they just didn't.
It's not difficult, but it's a lot cheaper to not go that full mile.
Yeah.
Because you already have a built-in audience who will come back for the sequel to drive the grosses up. So you don't have to try as hard. So you're putting that money in making the other parts of the movie bigger to add to the trailer to get them to show up.
Yeah, it's no different than like the Screams, the Nightmares, the Friday the 13th, the Halloween,
change,
like
and the prosthetics
the
and stuff.
Scenes, yeah, the different. Is he a zombie? Is he not a zombie? Is he in hell? Is he a robot? Like, it's just, yeah, exactly. It's a built-in audience, so people are gonna come see it because. And then there's the other half that's just like teenagers. Well, fuck, I'm gonna go see this movie because what else is there to do?
It's like I want my girl to grab on to me. Yes, I'm seeing the only horror movie at the theater tonight.
Exactly. So
Halloween Kills. Oh, I'm sorry.
We're gonna not talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll flat out hang up this call.
That will be a discussion after we go off the air. But no, I don't watch this movie. It's one that I own, not on purpose. I have Bride of Frankenstein because it's usually included in all the box sets and all that kind of jazz. But I'm not a fan. Once again, I am very doubtful when many people say this movie is their favorite movie of the Universal Monsters. I'm just like, why? And most of the time,
a low bar to end.
Most of the time, people can't give me an honest answer. I think they're just parroting what they've heard. But I know that you guys have seen it.
You get the anime catch up at the beginning, right? So that's Cliff's Notes for the first movie, right? So like you're right in there, and it's building up to there's a monster girl, everybody. It's for everybody, right? We're not going to tell you the monster girl doesn't show up until the last 5 minutes. And then, it becomes like, two scientist dudes being not boyfriends for like a lot of it. And then like, then maybe we'll give you the girl monster. But then, they both die in the end. And we got your money. It was an hour and 15 minutes. Goodbye. Go fuck yourself.
Or go fuck the person you took. That's basically, yeah.
Yeah. If they stay with you after taking them to this.
That's true. So wait, are you saying you're not a fan of it as well?
Oh, I'm a big fan of it, but I'm going under the auspice of like the color of the conversation we've been under.
Okay.
Where like it is a sequel. It suffers from sequelitis a bit, and it does suffer from a lot of like personality and like sexuality politics outside of the movie, and that agenda kind of being injected into it. And I mean, I love that movie. I love Bride of Frankenstein. It's a good quick watch, and like Praetorius is super fun because of the full queeniness and the people in little jars. Like, I mean, cool, man. Like, I'm down for it, but like I said before, I love Edward D. Wood Jr.
Yeah,
so
that's our perspective. Like, we watch Halloween 3 and Sleepaway Camp at least 5 times a year.
At least.
So that's, I mean, like, we'll watch legitimately like good horror movies, but then
but these other ones are good too. It's just like
I mean, I'm somebody who watches Plan 9 from Outer Space as like it's that time of year I need to watch it. Like it's something it fills me spiritually. Like
your stupid mind.
Oh my god.
All right. If there's nothing anyone else needs to gush about for Bride of Frankenstein, we will move on. We're not going to talk about Werewolf of London, which was not available to Mr. Rainwater, and really it doesn't get considered in the monsters icons.
I don't think I've seen it.
It's not really worth it in my opinion. It's actually a pretty boring fucking movie. The monster effects is not as impressive as when we get to Wolfman. Also coming up after Bride of Frankenstein was Dracula's Daughter, which I know Rainwater didn't have access to this one either, but just really quick, this was the OG Halloween 2, kind of, where it literally picks up seconds after the first movie let off, and it just goes from there. And again, very surprising, the sexual subtleties that were going on underneath this with like lesbian storylines, I guess you could call it. And just general women's sexuality in terms of it was the more accurate depiction of the prior definition of the word vampire, of a woman who was just taking advantage of a man for his money and so on and so forth. And that character, Dracula's daughter in that movie, is a better embodiment of that definition, which is a very good window for anyone who didn't know that that's what the original definition for a vampire was. So I definitely recommend it because fucking he's not in it very much, which was my biggest disappointment about the movie. But Edward Van Sloan is back as Dr. Abraham Van Helsing, which is, that was enough that sold me. As soon as I read it, it was like, picks up moments after Dracula left off with Dr. Van Helsing getting arrested. What the fuck? I gotta watch that. Like, that was immediately, like, my Dracula obsession took over. I was like, I gotta know what happens. And then it was not, it was not the vampire movie I was looking for. But it definitely is worth a watch, I would say, for cultural significance and so on and so forth. It's a good background movie to have on. Then we go to Son of Frankenstein. Also, Rainwater didn't have time to watch, or didn't have the ability to watch. But Son of Frankenstein, I love a whole lot more than Bride of Frankenstein because we are reverting right back to the horror stuff. Bela Lugosi's playing Igor, and we're more focused on the monster. The monster is more of a terrifying entity. It's more in line with the themes of the original Frankenstein movie. It's literally a soft reboot of Frankenstein 1. It's the same fucking story. Yeah. It's Dr. Frankenstein's son reanimating Frankenstein. It's the same goddamn movie, but with Bela Lugosi.
And Frankenstein wears a kicky toilet seat cover for the wardrobe for most of it.
Yeah.
It's a giant, like, fluffy toilet seat cover.
I thought that was Bride. Doesn't he wear that in Bride?
No, that's in Son.
Oh, okay.
In Bride, he's in his old, like, Herman Munster getup.
That's right. You're right. Okay. So Son of Frankenstein, I definitely would recommend that one. Then we go to Invisible Man Returns. I didn't have a problem with that one. We're going to keep moving. The Mummy's Hand. That's the one I was referencing before. That is the Mummy movie that's the one I fuck with. The Invisible Woman was a fucking nosedive.
Just let's pause it. You fuck with the Mummy's Hand. I want to get that.
For lack of better description.
Get that soundboard.
The Mummy's Hand I would recommend. The Invisible Woman I would not. The Invisible Woman to me was a step down because it was a rom-com, like a 1940s rom-com, like very boring, oh, I'm a woman, ha ha ha, kind of thing. And it doesn't really play upon the Invisible Man type mania, like that kind of stuff. It's just more jokes about, oh, she's a woman, oh, she's got to hide her clothes, oh, it's about love. Like, it was just too much of that. It wasn't in vein with what that franchise I felt should be, but it wasn't for me. I would still say check it out because why not? After that, we're getting to big time. The Wolfman.
Yep.
1941. Now, this is the second werewolf movie. Werewolf of London was technically the first, but it did not connect, and I can see why when I watch it. But the Wolfman is the guy who rounds out my top four. So Dracula, Invisible Man, Wolfman, and Frankenstein. Those are my top four. Wolfman to me is, again, the atmosphere. The fucking fog going on in that stuff. And to me, it's the romance that works because I am completely in love with what's-her-face. Is her name Gwen Conliffe? Is that the name of the character or the actress? I'm blanking. I need to click on it. Hold on. Oh my god, is she not even listed? What the fuck? Evelyn Ankers. Yeah, so it's Gwen. I think her name is Gwen. Evelyn Ankers as Gwen Conliffe. Yeah, I got that right. Okay. Yeah. She was the first Monsters girl that I was crushing on. I was like, I'm okay with this. I understand this. Lugosi is cast literally as his fucking self. He's named Bella.
Bella.
The performance is great. Fucking Lon Chaney Jr. is a tall motherfucker.
So good.
And
that's so good.
His performance in this is one of those performances that you really need to understand. When he's the monster, when he's the Wolfman, he is performing. Like he's on Karloff level here because he's hunching over. It's the OG. Like, people like to look at The Dark Knight and go, I can't tell that's Heath Ledger. If you really look at the Wolfman in the Wolfman makeup and the way his mannerisms change, his eyes, the way he moves, all that stuff, Lon Chaney Jr. is on fucking point to be, quote-unquote, a chameleon. Like, it's just so good how much he goes from this kind of Clark Kentish, bumbling, very astute gentleman kind of type to the Wolfman. It's a great performance, and I think the rest of the film, it's also got good old what's his name? Invisible Man. Jesus, Claude Rains playing his Poppy, which is great. Especially because he's so short. It's one of those things where it's like, how tall was Mom? Like,
Yeah.
But I absolutely love the atmosphere. I feel like the story, it's only a 70-minute movie, but I feel like the story goes quite well. This is one of the movies where the score starts coming into play a little bit more, where they start introducing that a little bit more. The special effects makeup are on point. Everything about this movie kind of hits for me. Rainwater, welcome back to the discussion. Oh, that's right. You were here for Bride of Frankenstein. Never mind.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts checking this one out?
Oh, I'm going to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I know Joker had this one high on his thing, so I
yeah.
kind of want to end with him because he's going to be the strong point.
Okay.
Yeah, had more facial hair, so Wolfman.
I would say this one, Wolfman's a really interesting one from a thematic perspective because it's one that is more, it's a little more subtle than I think all the other ones. This is one where it's more about something that's in every person's heart, basically. Like, there's the human being, and the human is like the angel and the animal, basically. And that seems to be the main sort of theme that surfaces in this movie, talking about like what is the thing that separates civility from, I mean, not necessarily this movie. You could also say this applies also to Invisible Man, and a couple other movies. What is the thing that separates civility from, cruelty, basically?
Or just abandon.
Yeah, I like the way you're putting that. This is one where I enjoy a lot of the that staff that he has with his head. That really stands out in my head. I think about that a lot because it's also a very unique set piece. And this is like a movie where like a lot of scenes just kind of stand out in my head because when he's killing the wolf, right? Like that's another scene that's just like it's it's very intense. It's very like kind of comes at you immediately, like out of nowhere in a sense. In the way that he's like exhausted as he's like beating the wolf, like really kind of gives this idea of like you kind of get the sense that like, oh, okay, the animal is like coming out of him even in that moment, right? I'm curious what y'all have to say, because something that also came to my mind in this is like, and the movie doesn't make this really like up front necessarily, but there is sort of like a subtle note of like carnal lust, basically.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm curious what thoughts y'all have in regards to that, or even just the whole movie in general.
Well, I would argue this is the first, what do you say, like marketably popular body horror movie.
Oh yeah.
Because like you could make that argument for Frankenstein, but it's not as much of like I'm in a rotting shell more than I didn't ask to be brought back to life. He is struggling with I'm turning into this thing. I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing for him to be punished for. He did nothing wrong. He did not trespass on anything. He's a good man, and this stuff still happened, and now he has to deal with the consequences of just sheer chance. And he has no control over his mind or his body.
That was another thing that really like is unsettling in the movie when he's like trying to deal with like, I'm not guilty for what I did, right? Like, and in that you see that like slowly kind of like take over his sense of self, right? Because it's like, oh, I killed a person and I didn't think I was killing a person at the time. and what I was killing, I thought was, and was doing something extremely violent and hurting somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those. It's a movie that's very like what's the word? It's like morally. It's not necessarily morally ambiguous, but it's like morally like complex, basically.
Yes.
I don't know if that's.
I wanted to jump in here, and I wanted to kind of get the opinion of you guys on this. And let me just, because just in case everybody here or listening is not familiar with the Hays Code. The Hays Code was kind of the original MPAA. It was a self-imposed industry set of guidelines for all motion pictures that were released between 1934 and 1968. And the rules, hang on, I gotta pull them up because I don't know them off the top of my head. The rules of the Hays Code was basically kind of shutting down sexuality and language and all that kinds of stuff. It was kind of, the MPAA, the far Christian right, shutting down any kind of sexuality or whatever in cinema. And I'm curious to know if you guys think this movie was made as not a thinly veiled, but a nice middle finger to the whole Hays Code thing. Because if you're looking at the themes that we're talking about in Wolfman, it's about suppression of like a carnal lust, right? And that being inevitable coming out. Like at no point whatsoever, it's going to come out. And I'm curious to know if you guys think that maybe that was kind of the reasoning behind maybe why this movie not only was made, but maybe why it connected with audiences. Because at this point, the Hays Code had been in effect for a couple of years. So the audiences were kind of like, hey, remember in Dracula's Daughter when we had lesbian? And like it was like, hey, we had some more exciting shit going on here. And now it's all being suppressed. So I'm kind of curious if you guys think that that's maybe what's prevalent about what appeals about this movie, is that it's subtly trading in that whole, hey, this is how people really are, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rainwater and I mean, having studied sequential art and comics, the obvious parallel to draw is Seduction of the Innocent and the Comic Code Authority.
Yep.
And by and large, when you impose something like that, and I'm editorializing, things get boring. Things they're not an accurate representation of the experience of life in its fullness.
Right.
Because like white bread Christian values are not what life is. Like you can aspire to them, you can hold them in high esteem if you'd like to, you can embattle them if you'd like to. They're not representative of an accurate portrayal of life. And when you're trying to tell a narrative that's enticing and engaging, you need that stuff.
Things that are primal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's in all of us. And I think that's what makes Wolfman at its core, and werewolves in general, so provocative, I guess, and interesting. I'll say for my bit, I mean, I'm going to kind of save my big spew for later, but like, werewolves are probably one of my favorite monsters ever, period. I always tell her, like, if I could be a werewolf and guarantee it wouldn't hurt, and I could guarantee I wouldn't kill anyone I love, I'd love to be a werewolf.
You have to do the Oz thing and just make sure you were chained up, just to do the keeping everyone safe type deal. But I personally, I think this was the industry responding to, or at least the artists responding to the corporate overlords in a way that they wouldn't have noticed. And I think that's why it connects. I think there's subtlety that's put into this movie and in the craftsmanship that really kind of speaks. And it kind of makes it, no pun intended, but universal in terms of the era in which it's viewed, if that makes sense. That's why I feel like it appeals to me. And because fucking Evelyn Ankers is hot as hell. But it's weird. It's so weird to watch these movies that are in black and white with women that I know are older than my grandmother. And I'm like, Like,
can I interject really briefly here? I'm going to kind of derail us, but I'll bring us back, I promise.
Yeah.
Are we, where, Jow, in the outline are we with Creature from the Black Lagoon and This Island Earth?
Okay. So we're going to be skipping a whole bunch of movies. I'm going to run through them like how I've with other ones, but Creature from the Black Lagoon is next. I don't know where this island Earth falls because A, it's not listed, and B, I have not seen it. It's not a movie that I have been able to track.
Shit.
I have not been able to track
one,
down that
see
one.
Uh-huh.
Number one, see that. Number two, the reason I mention it is because we're talking about 40s and 50s baddies who we want to like get down with because they're super hot.
Oh, yeah.
Millicent Patrick.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
She designed Creature from the Black Lagoon, the creature.
Oh, she was the OG. Me and Erin talked about this.
She's the OG, and she designed the Metaluna mutant in This Island Earth. Two of my favorite monsters for being visually, like Wolfman's my favorite overall, but visually as an artist, Creature and Metaluna mutant, you don't get any better than that. And then you see her, and you're like, wow, all that talent was in that extremely gorgeous woman.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit.
1955, by the way.
55 for This Island Earth.
I have not seen. Okay, 55 is This Island Earth. It's not listed. See,
Yeah, we might want to do a part 2 where we do some sci-fi movies because I would say This Island Earth and Forbidden Planet. Those two.
Forbidden Planet with Leslie Nielsen.
Classic.
Yeah.
Is that Leslie Nielsen?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, with Robbie the Robot. Or not Robbie
the
Robot.
Yeah.
That's Lost in Space, but the black one, the darker colored one.
Yeah. I forgot what his name is. Is it Robbie?
Well, okay, so let's wrap up real quick. Wolfman.
Yeah.
Great movie. Definitely in my top 4.
Movie. Hot chick, great performances, body horror,
great makeup. Yep.
Atmosphere, lots of fog.
This to me this was peak Universal Monsters. I think that was like, you know what I mean? I feel like it was the culmination of everything finally connecting at its absolute peak. Then I'm gonna kind of browse through a couple quick ones here, like I have been. After Wolfman, we have Ghost of Frankenstein, where now it's really obvious we're getting repetitive with the story of Frankenstein. Invisible Agent,
lost left shoe.
Invisible Agent, which is the exact same issue I have with Invisible Woman, where it's not really an Invisible Man movie, it's a spy thriller with just the invisible special effect tacked on, and it's not really taken to its full potential in terms of horror and zaniness and all that kind of stuff. It's just a by the book, beat by beat spy movie. Moving on to that, Mummy's Tomb. I don't know if I've seen that, but I feel like I have, and I feel like it was forgettable. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Now, Rainwater, I know you didn't have access to this or even probably think to watch it, but have you seen Frankenstein meets the Wolfman?
I haven't yet.
Okay, then we'll move past it. But that was decent in terms of the first, like, MCU crossover type stuff that the Universal Monsters were doing first. Then there's stuff on this list that I've never even heard of. Captive Wild Woman, Phantom of the Opera. I'm torn as to whether or not I would include that. There's 2 different versions that you could talk about. You could talk about the Claude Rains version, and you can talk about the what the fuck is his name? Hold on. Lon Chaney version, thank you. To me,
then you can talk about the Robert Englund version.
I haven't seen that one.
Freddie, Phantom of the Opera.
I saw the other 2, and people made fun of me for this, and I know you guys are going to too. But I went into these movies not expecting them to be operas themselves. They are operas. They are musical fucking movies. And I was like, my mind was in Goosebumps, Phantom of the Auditorium, where it's just about like shit going on during the production of a theater thing. And that's what I was expecting. And that's not what I got. So I was not a fan. Son of Dracula, I think that was Lon Chaney Jr. playing it. And it's just Lon Chaney Jr. being Lon Chaney Jr. Like, as much as I praised his acting in Wolfman, I'm going to like tear it down here where it's like, oh, he's just being Lon Chaney Jr. as quote unquote Dracula's son, but not really Dracula's son. He just plays him. I think he's portrayed as just Dracula. It was very fucking fuzzy. I don't know.
They could have just called it Big White Vampire.
Yeah, really. They really could have. The Mad Ghoul, never heard of, never seen. Invisible Man's Revenge, I feel like that might have been a good one. Was that the one with Vincent Price as the Invisible Man? I can't tell. Oh, it's got Evelyn Ankers in it again, which she was the dame. Oh, John Carradine. I think he was playing the Invisible Man, and he also played Dracula in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Mummy's Ghost, House of Frankenstein, I feel like was a good one, but I don't remember much about it. Mummy's Curse, House of Dracula, House of Horrors, She-Wolf of London, blah, blah, blah. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which, Rainwater, have you seen that one?
I have actually seen that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can talk about that one if you guys want to, but otherwise we're going on to Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay.
Abbott and Costello, one-note joke plus Frankenstein. You get the idea.
Plus Lugosi's only return as Dracula.
Yeah.
That's the only highlight of that movie that I went into it for. I was like, oh, he plays him again finally? And then it's like, oh, not really.
And the podcast debut of our cat Beans, because she was trying to tear down our curtains. So welcome, Beans.
Hi, Beans. All right, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Joker, don't kill me.
Yeah.
Bored the shit out of me. I cannot get.
Here's the thing about Creature.
This movie, I cannot get. I don't understand the hype behind it. I want to, but I can't.
Here's the thing about the Creature. That movie is less, because Jow, you're a big fan of gothic horror. Just
Moody,
horror,
atmospheric, dark horror. Yeah, I would say so.
Like, if your horror tastes are beverages, you're drinking like 30 to 40% Tang powder and like the rest water. Whereas this, there's a little bit of Tang powder, but you're putting it in like a juice. There's another flavor there.
Yeah.
And that flavor is an adventure, like a jungle adventure.
Sure.
It's African Queen plus a fish.
Plus
man.
a monster. And I like that. Because I like when you take a monster and you drop it into another genre.
Okay.
It kind of throws, because I like horror so much. Take a monster and drop it in any genre, I'll buy a ticket, because it's just I don't know, it just broadens the range of things you can get with it. Because like no shame to gothic horror, right? I love it too. It has so many great things about it. But like, let's be honest, you know what to expect out of a gothic horror. You have the checklist you're looking for.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's something completely new. When you see a guy who's a stuntman and a trained deep sea diver in a full body rubber makeup doing underwater camera shots that are choreographed, and then being a monster when he's above water too. And there are some snappy lines akin to the Mummy's Gal Friday lines in this one, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's a lot to love about it. But then you go on and, like, once again, they degrade as the sequels go on, because the Creature gradually, it's like the second one, they're putting him in a tank, and oh, God, he busted out of the tank and killed people. Big surprise. And then the third one, oh, let's give him clothes and try to make him a person, even though he's got a kid face. That's going to fucking work out really well.
Yeah.
I do like in the second one, he just is flipping cars like nobody's
He's
business.
just like, fuck this thing, fuck that over there. And I'm just like, yeah, that's exactly what I feel like.
That's something that I feel like I was missing from Creature from the Black Lagoon. Is he kills a couple people, but it's all kind of off screen, you know? It's all like the glove, you know?
Because they couldn't figure out how to make that visual.
Yeah, it didn't seem like there was a lot of action for the creature himself, you know? Like there were interesting scenes where like he's when he's stalking like the leading lady and like he's swimming, you know, parallel. Like that's interesting.
Underneath the water, that's cool.
Yeah, like that's really interesting, but they never quite I don't feel like they quite did enough with what was there.
Well, and this is the thing that strikes me about older movies, and I'm not saying that modern movies aren't guilty of that as well, but because filmmaking was such an infant industry, like they figured out, we figured out this one really cool gimmick.
Yeah.
What about like all the other things that can make it? We've got this really cool gimmick, and we figured it out, and that's what we're selling this movie on. So the fact that they were like, we got a deep sea diver, he's a stunt guy, we're gonna put him in a rubber suit, he's gonna swim around, we got an underwater camera, it's gonna be great. And they're like, but this is a monster movie. Hey, it's great. He's underwater, you guys.
And get this, the woman's gonna be in a bathing suit that, get this, doesn't cover a lot. You
Listen,
hear me? The pros are gonna be high on this.
Listen.
So here's my thing.
Julie Adams is the movie. Is the reason I will watch this movie, because she is the top dame of the Universal Monsters ladies. Ooh.
Yeah, she's bomb for sure.
So here's my thing. This is how I highly recommend watching Creech 2. Watch the Mystery Science Theater episode because it's one of the best episodes. And they nail some things about this where you're like, yeah. And like the boat driver is so disgusting. He looks like he's made of like grease. And they just, the one-liners that they just keep like shelling out. It's beautiful. So highly recommend that vehicle.
Yeah. I would describe him with Brian Posehn's classic line. He's like a bunch of farts put on a man costume.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's a very good. I like what you pointed out earlier, Matt, about how it's not necessarily a horror movie. It's like it's injected into something that's more like an adventure movie, or something that's more like it's an adventure movie, kind of sci-fi-ish, right? Because you go with this whole posture of like, well, what if there's a species that evolved and all that other stuff, like
it's a cryptid movie.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the part that interests me, that I liked about it. I wish it would have done it in a more something more, like something a little more. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, it has pacing issues, and they don't show the monster enough.
Yeah,
for sure. And like on the topic of the monster, Riku Browning, who played the monster, the creature from the Black Lagoon, he has been ailing in health recently, and he has put out online, you can Google this, his mailing address, because he wants fans of the film to write him to cheer him up.
That's awesome.
He's not asking for money. He's asking for just for some love.
Just letters.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
From fans. Yeah, he's not. He's definitely not asking for money.
Mm-hmm.
He's just kind of down in spirits and ailing in health. So he has put out a call to the internet for letters of fans of monsters and horror in the Black Lagoon. So
that's good.
I will put that out there.
No, that's great for our listeners if they are fans of this particular film, or even if they're not, they're just good, cool people, and they want to hook a whole old man up with some love, with some snail mail. Don't sooner rather than later, because the way the mail's working right now, you want to get that letter out there. I don't know. For this movie, I feel like if it was more horror-ish, like if you were to remake this movie today and the director said, "Oh, I like Creature from the Black Lagoon, but I'm taking it from like a Jaws perspective," you got me in the seat, where it's like, oh, that's what we're going with. Like, because Jaws is one of those movies that starts off very horror and transitions into an adventure movie. And that, to me, that's how it works, where it's not muddled back and forth, like trying to shake up oil and water into one thing, but it's just a gradual transition from one tone to another. That's how it works for me. So if it had started like that for me, like it was like a start of a horror movie and it kind of melted into an adventure movie, I would have been much more. I mean, they didn't have the sensibilities in the 1940s, 50s. What was this?
Yeah, and I mean, Jaws is one of the all-time great scripts of movies.
And that was a perfect storm of accidents that they didn't intend, of like, you know what I mean? Like the shark didn't work and all that shit. Like Spielberg got lucky. He's a great filmmaker, but he got lucky. So, it's hard to know that sensibility until, you stumble upon it. So I'm not holding it against the film. I'm just saying that's kind of more because my modern sensibilities have been exposed to Jaws. So I guess maybe if I hadn't been, I might have been more adept to be on vibe with this movie, but it's just the way it is.
Well, let me pitch you how you do Creech nowadays. You do a framework story.
Wait,
of like,
I know this. It won the Academy Award. You put him in a bathtub and he fucks a chick who's deaf.
And he likes eating eggs.
And it's Doug Jones. So, no, so the framework is one of these dildos from like Travel Channel that's like, oh, I'm gonna find the giant jungle bat, and like they're going around and interviewing all these villagers that are just like, oh, get this stupid white person out of my village, and but then like they actually come across
a fish
something, and they're utterly unprepared for it because everyone who's there is utterly cynical. They're just like, oh yeah, we've got to do the ghost hunters thing where it's like, oh, did you hear a noise? Oh, did you hear a noise? And so it's like,
and then they hear a noise.
Yeah, and then it's real, and then it's eating them.
Or if you
But,
did
like-
if you did it like the OG Blair Witch, like a found footage
Yeah.
movie, I would actually ride with that. I could see where that would be actually pretty good. Where, you know what I mean? Hey, did you catch that on camera? I don't know, man. It's film. We can't watch it back.
I mean,
you know, like,
speaking as somebody who comes from a state that has a lot of swamps, the water can be fucking creepy.
Yeah.
It's very dark. You don't know what is down there. Like,
It's either
You can-
gators or amoebas. Like,
you know, it's kind of ironic too, because I think one of the things that might actually work against this movie is how clear the water is. If they had figured out, and maybe this was just something that wasn't really available to them or whatever, but like if they had figured out some way to create more obscurity, you know,
Mhm.
where it's not so clear as to what's going on underwater, I think that would have really ramped up a lot of the tension.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like the place this movie really sings is the creature design.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That design is and like
Yeah, it's awesome.
it's good for a different reason. The Monster Squad version of Creech is
Oh.
also really good because he looks a lot more fishy in the face.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, Millicent Patrick killed it on this movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we were just talking. We went to Horror Hound Cincinnati recently, and we were talking with some other artists because they had a pinup drawing of Millicent Patrick, which we bought instantly because we didn't think we'd see that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were discussing how at the time, movie houses would just hire these tremendously talented artists, sometimes women,
Mm-hmm.
to design these great designs. But then when people ask, like, oh, who designed that? They would give the shop runner's name, who was a man.
Bud Westmore.
He already had like a built career, right? But now it's come out like, you know, Metaluna Mutant and Creech were designed by Millicent Patrick, and she freaking killed it.
Mm-hmm.
So
It
that's
is
my
definitely it. When I'm looking at the design on my screen right now, it's definitely unique. And if I saw that shit in the water, coming out of the water, like bug-eyed and everything like that, I would abandon whoever I was with to their watery grave as I trucked it away from that thing. I'm not disputing that at all.
It's a full body suit too. It's not just a robot costume. It's a full body suit.
Right.
Yeah.
Jack Kevin did the suit. She just did the head.
Yeah.
If I'm
But
correct.
the head is arguably the most iconic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The suit is it's a swimmer's suit with, you know, a little bit of makeup or prosthetic design and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, no, the face and stuff is where it all everybody looks right there. Nobody's really, well, I mean, you are looking at the hands a lot. Rainwater pointed this out on his Twitter feed where it's like 90% of this movie is just the hands moving through the water.
They got a lot of action out of the gloves, but I mean, I know that it's because they're trying to save like the money shot, right? They're
Sure.
trying to save it for like when they unveil the creature fully, and like they do a pretty good job of that, because it's like you don't entirely expect the reveal to happen when they're like, you know, they're scuba diving and you're kind of getting an idea that the creature's around there, and then suddenly you get like a glimpse of it, right? And then from there, you know, they have to reveal more and more and more of the creature from that point, because now you've let the cat out of the bag, basically.
Well, and this is also one of the first Universal monster movies to be in 3D. That's
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, this was when they first came out with 3D, and Creature was the first big like Universal jumping on that bandwagon.
Interesting. Now, tell me about, we're going to wrap up here with a movie that I have not seen, that's not on my list. What is it called again with the Metaluna Mutant?
This Island Earth?
This Island Earth. Okay. Because, see, here's the thing, and you're probably going to have to educate me a little bit here. When you originally mentioned it back on a previous podcast or just a chat we were having, I sought it out because I was like, oh, I got to find Metaluna Mutant. And I noticed on the backs of one of my action figures that he was included amongst the other Universal monsters. But, like, I got that 30-film Blu-ray box set, and I've looked and stuff like that, and it's not in anything. It's not in the list on Wikipedia that I'm looking at now. He's not normally referenced as a Universal monster. And then on top of that, it looked like there was like a dozen different titles for the same movie, and I couldn't figure out which one I was looking for.
The reason for that is because This Island Earth was a Universal International film.
Okay.
Which was like kind of like the Fox Searchlight of Universal films.
Okay.
It was a branch off for sure, and that's probably largely owing to why it's not included in the general roster of monsters.
Yeah.
But amongst like horror and monster fans, you will see him pop up pretty regularly in like merch and art, and just because the design is so rad. And I'll be honest with you, that monster is not the main focus of that movie. He's not in the movie that much. Mm-hmm. But when you see him, you never forget him because it's such a cool design.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I'm going to have to track this movie down.
The movie itself, what it's about is about a beefy, hunky scientist.
As they are.
Yeah, he's like a nuclear physicist or something, which, with his looks, why wouldn't he be?
And also a pilot.
Right.
And he gets basically sent some beads in the mail instead of some reactors or something that he ordered. And these beads do the same job as the reactor, but they're like that big, and they hold more charge than a normal huge reactor would. So he's like, we got to figure this out. Who sent these? And so he's like, I'm going to order more parts to the same address. They're going to intercept it again and send me something else. And so out of this catalog, he orders basically this big home computer, space-age home computer, and meets these alien guys with giant foreheads, and then his adventure begins.
Wow.
To not spoil the film for you, but that's kind of the onset.
And this was 1950 something?
Yeah, I mean, it's peak atomic age, so I mean,
That's what I was thinking. Okay. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. If you haven't seen any of these movies, at least one of us is recommending it. So obviously do yourself a favor and check them out. If we've all recommended it, that's probably your best bet to start. And then you can kind of move on.
I'll also say, check your local library for these movies.
Yes.
Our libraries need support, and I'll bet you they have them.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. I was about to hawk the 4K releases, but you know what? That's probably a better angle. Support, and not only support your local library, but watch them for free. And I think also not to thwart your promo for the libraries there, Joker, but I think some of them are on Peacock. So if you have Peacock, I think you could just stream some of them right there. But it's only
up your Peacock.
It's only for
Probably
for Halloween, because I know some of them were, but there's also other black and white movies. I think the point that I wanted to get to with this was there's a lot of redeemable shit in black and white horror movies that people overlook in favor of gore and B-movie, like 80s. Like, everybody likes to talk about the 80s horror movies and slashers, and don't get me wrong, they're great. I love them.
Oh, I love them.
There is so much treasure to be found in the early days of horror movies that you really need to give them a fair shake. And like I rediscovered my love for them standing in line for a haunt at Halloween. Like, they were playing Dracula on a projection screen while you waited in line, which I thought was fucking perfect. And that's when I was like, oh, I haven't watched this in a long time. And then I put it on and I was like, holy shit, this is a lot better than I remember it as a kid. Like, as a kid, you can't really appreciate it. And then I fell down the rabbit hole. So I'm imploring you, if you have the opportunity, or if you don't, if you're just tired of watching Halloween over and over and over again in October, give the black and white movies a shake. You'll be surprised. I definitely think there's something for everyone here. That's one of the things you hear people parrot, that phrase, there's something for everyone. There literally fucking is here. And if you've been listening to our discussion going on 2 hours now, our longest episode yet, but I would argue probably one of our best. I absolutely say there is something here for everyone. You will find a monster movie that you will find your monster somewhere.
And let me take a moment, because here's the thing. I love and respect the Universal monsters. I understand that may not be everybody's cup of tea. It may move a little slow, the black and white, you're not feeling it. If you want something that bridges the gap between Universal, the classic stuff, to like your more modern, Hammer horror.
All day.
Go find your Hammer horror. Like anything with Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee.
Gold.
Oh my God, you will not be disappointed. It is always aces. Always aces.
Fair enough. Rainwater, do you have anything?
You could do a whole episode on Hammer horror, because literally every one you watch is great.
Probably
And we'll
gonna
be back.
probably gonna be next October. I would not be surprised if we load it
Yeah,
there.
that'd be fun.
Given how much hammer horror there is, me and Rainwater probably need to start now. So, but we've got time to kind of build for that. But yeah, I would definitely say I've seen some of the hammer horror films, and they are definitely quality for that 70s, late 60s, 70s kind of horror that you're looking for. But it's not a slasher. It's not Exorcist, but it's.
And they've got a lot of your gothic horror that you really like now.
Ton of it.
Yeah.
Some questionable filmmaking stuff, but that's for the other podcast. So anyway, if we're gonna go, I know we started off by everybody saying their favorite monster movie, but I'm gonna allow you to be a little bit of a hypocrite here if you want to. I just want to go around the table here and just recommend which one you think people should start with if they've never seen a Universal Monsters movie at all. I will kick us off, and I will say The Wolfman is probably the one that I would say people should watch first, because I think it's the most accessible. And I think it's the most, I don't want to say relatable, but accessible, I guess, is the word, where it's got enough modern day sensibility with that classic vibe.
Or do we want to do top threes? Because you gave a top three that was pretty solid.
Did I give what was my top three?
Well, you gave a top four.
Oh, my top
Dracula,
four. Yeah.
Wolfman, and Frankenstein.
Yes. Those are my top four monsters, and in that order. So if you guys want to piggyback on that and give your top four of monsters, I will allow it, since I've kind of been a hypocrite with my whole Sophie's Choice thing as I went on. So Rainwater, you're the newbie in terms of watching the majority of these. I will let you kick us off there.
All right, so top four.
Well, we know number one is fucking Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, it is.
So go for number two.
And not even necessarily because of Frankenstein's monster, but because of Dr. Pretorius, who should be amongst them. Okay, so Bride of Frankenstein, number one. Number two, Invisible Man. Number three, Dracula. I mean, Bela fucking Lugosi. I mean, it's just hard to put it down. And then number four.
The fourth child is the hardest.
It's really hard. Because it's either between Wolfman and Frankenstein. I'm gonna go with Frankenstein because I just love the artistry in that movie. There's just such really interesting, some good shots, some really great set pieces. And I really love the way Frankenstein's monster originally looks like. It's just very striking. Yeah. So Matt and Erin?
Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to stick with my number one, Wolfman. Number two, I would say, are we doing monster or the movie?
Oh, that's a good. Well, Rainwater kind of said I listed monsters, and Rainwater transformed it into definitely a monster because he named Pretorius. So if you want to do monsters over movies, go for it.
I'll do both. I'll do a little subset. So Wolfman, number one. Number two, I gotta say Creech, just because of the monster. I love that monster so much. Number three, I would say Bride of Frankenstein, probably, just for Elsa Lancaster's performance. Limited as it was.
I was gonna say.
She was Mary Shelley as well.
Okay, all right, I'll give you that.
That's right.
Invisible Man, and that's my four.
So run
just
down
because
real
I
quick.
like Metaluna Mutant, but that movie is not as good as the ones I've listed.
All right, so those were the movies, right?
Those were the movies.
So if you're top four monsters.
Monsters, Creech, Metaluna Mutant, Wolfman. Are we sticking to Universal?
Yes, for this particular episode.
Then I will say Invisible Man for my fourth.
Erin, you're wrapping us up.
Fudge. Invisible Man, Spanish Dracula. Because I'm with him. I'll take Bella and Ed Wood movies more than...
Pull the string!
Breaking my heart here, people.
Well, I'm paying it forward because apparently you've got some shit to say about Halloween Kills. But so Invisible Man, Spanish Dracula.
Spanish Dracula sounds like a euphemism for something.
Yeah. Wolfman.
It took me a minute.
And yeah, Creech is the fourth one.
Creech.
Yeah.
We're a Creech house here.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been 2 hours.
I'm a guy who can't swim. Creech is double terrifying to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been our first 2-hour podcast, and I promise you, in the time it took you to listen to this podcast, you could have watched at least 5 Universal Monsters horror movies because they're all like barely 60 minutes. So that's another wonderful thing about these movies is that they got to it and they got it over with. Like they didn't draw shit out. So
yeah.
If you're looking for a quickie, like if we're going about weird euphemisms, Universal Monster movies are the original Netflix and chill, man, because if you're just putting on the movie and you're looking to get busy, it's not a movie that's going to have to, really A, demand your attention all that much, and B, it's not going to be on very long, so you can get down to business. Just saying.
Yeah. For a good time, call Dr. Pretorius.
But no, this has been definitely a fun talk. I have been dying to talk with Monsters folk for a while. It's lonely, even in the horror community. It's not something that people really want to discuss. They would rather talk about Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy Krueger and all that kind of stuff, which I love as well. But
James Wan right now is a big topic.
Yeah, the whole Malignant thing. But that's a whole nother thing. You could talk about Malignant and Halloween Kills. The fucking horror fandom is at each other's throats right now. And I feel like it's just because it's October and we feel like we need to be murderous or something, but
well, it's like the full moon of the Wolfman. Our powers are at their peak right
now. But we're taking it out on each other, which is what's so sad. But anyway, this has been one of my favorite episodes. I don't care if it's been the longest. I don't care if it's been the best or not. That's for you to decide. It's definitely one of my favorites. And if you have not seen any of these movies, which I know a lot of people have not actually seen a lot of these movies, they've kind of absorbed the iconography through the zeitgeist. That's cool, but give them a chance. Like, they're not boring. They're really not. Well, I mean, The Mummy's pretty boring, but outside of that I would still watch it just to actually have watched it, and you might disagree with me, which you're more than welcome to do.
I did like his presence as Emotep, like when he came as like
Karloff
that
demands.
Was pretty choice, but yeah, overall,
Karloff demands. He's got that screen presence where it's just like, oh, Karloff's on screen, I'll watch. But overall, I would say you need to watch these movies if you're a self-respecting horror fan, or if you're tired of the same old stuff in October. These are really great flicks to check out. So that'll about do it for this week's episode of Midnight at the Spaghetti Factory. For Miss Erin, Mr. Joker, Mr. Rainwater, I am Jow, thanking you all for sticking with us for 2 hours. I hope it made it a great episode. Now I'm just fucking talking, so let's end it. Good night, and happy Halloween. When this comes out, everyone, it'll be Halloween within the next 2 or 3 days. Get your costumes ready at the last minute and all that other bullshit. Oh, shit. We should talk about making Halloween costumes next year. Fuck. I didn't even think of that for a topic this year. I'm such an asshole. We do an art podcast, and I didn't even talk about making Halloween costumes. Fuck.
Adding that to the list.
I'm adding that to the list along with our carving jack-o'-lanterns, which I swear we are going to get one of the great master carvers on to talk about tips and all that kind of stuff, because I really want to. That's like the weirdest economic boom I've seen in recent years of people who are really good at carving jack-o'-lanterns just making a shit ton of money and a lot of business. And props to them, because I fucking suck at it and I want to get better. But anyway, now I'm definitely wrapping it up. Thank you everybody for listening. Happy Halloween, and we will see you next week. Good night.